The longest government shutdown on record is finally over after 43 days, but most Democrats are still unhappy about it. They're especially angry at Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader who voted against the compromise to reopen the government, but that isn't getting him off the hook because he failed to keep his caucus together to keep the shutdown going. What does this tell us about Schumer's future as a leader of the Democratic Party in the Senate and the party itself as it goes into the midterm year of 2026? Plus, the Jeffrey Epstein story returns with a release of emails from Epstein and others regarding Donald Trump, among others. What did we learn that's new in these emails, if anything, and what does it mean for Trump's political standing?
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome. I'm Paul Gigot here on Potomac Watch, our daily podcast of WSJ Opinion, and I'm here with my colleagues Bill McGurn and Kim Strassel. Welcome to you both. Let's talk about the Democratic fury over Chuck Schumer. He actually kept most of his caucus together for 43 days, which was no small feat, before some of the swing state senators broke away, negotiated with Republicans, and decided to vote to reopen the government. But is Chuck Schumer really to blame for what happened? Let's listen to Seth Moulton, a Democratic congressman from Massachusetts.
I think there's a leadership vacuum in the Democratic Party right now, and it's time for a new generation of Democrats to step up. And that's the message I'm running on in Massachusetts, and it's the message that we need to hear across the country. The two brightest spots for Democrats in the past week were Abigail Spanberger in Virginia and Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, representing a new generation of leadership and now taking over entire states. That's what Democrats are excited about right now. We're frustrated, frankly, with the status quo, with the same old playbook that Schumer and others are using that's led us to a second term of Donald Trump where he's hurting a lot of people.
Now, Seth Moulton's kind of an interesting figure politically, folks. He's running against Senator Markey in Massachusetts. And actually, as it happened last night, I watched Moulton on a documentary by Michael and Gina Pack about the Battle of Najaf in Iraq when he was a platoon leader. Looks younger then than he is today, but he's still young. And this new generation argument is really catching on among Democrats, Kim. But let me ask you the first point. Is Schumer really the problem here with the shutdown? Is he the blame for all of this and for electing Donald Trump?
No, of course not. Look, the mentality behind the shutdown is actually what is largely to blame, and that is the ascendance of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which the ideology behind that became mainstay in the Biden administration. It was behind a great deal of the economic and other societal problems that were going on by the time we got to last year's election. Donald Trump campaigned against that. Democrats seem to understand that was the problem. At least there was some self-reflection in the wake of the election. And you still have some center-left groups out there arguing for a different path forward. But one of the consequences in particular of their victories in this election is people have now surged forward looking at Mamdani saying in New York, saying, oh, look, we still have a lot of mojo. This resistance mentality to gridlock and stopping everything is all they've got at the moment. And it's not necessarily winning them anything. That Moulton comment was fascinating to me, Paul, because I'm not sure what he's arguing against. Spanberger and Sherrill ran as moderates. It's progressives in the Senate that are behind a lot of the party's ills. So Chuck Schumer this time around was standing with those progressives, which to me, and I think to a lot of moderate Democrats, is not the real way forward for the party.
Well, Moulton and the rest of the Democrats in the House could afford to vote against reopening if they wanted to, and as most of them did, because there's no price for it. It's open. So they get the benefit of it being open, and they can play to the base and say, see, I'm fighting for you. And, oh, by the way, that Schumer guy is the problem. But Bill, so Schumer in May stuck with the moderates to give enough votes to keep the government open then. He was blamed for that by the Democratic base. This time he stuck with the left and the interest groups to keep the government shut down. But he couldn't control in the end enough of the moderates. But 43 days is a long time to keep that caucus together. So he sided with the left, and they're still unhappy. I mean, he's in a kind of no-win situation here. Reminds me a little bit of what the Republican base thought of Mitch McConnell and John Boehner when they were in the minority on Capitol Hill and Democrats ran the show. The base expects nowadays these leaders to somehow stop the majority agenda, though they don't have the votes to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. Votes matter. And a lot of the stuff is explained, the shenanigans going on, because neither side really has enough votes. They're, 2 or 3 short to get their way. So you have this kind of ridiculous show that we always have. I think the Democrats could make a case that they actually got what they set out for, which was to have the issue of the shutdown through the election. And I think that's borne out, I would argue, it's borne out by the infighting that we now see, now that they don't have the issue. Like they're all fighting and it's out in the open. And they're not so much attacking Republicans as fighting among themselves. So it's kind of like, despite it looking so chaotic to Americans, I think we all expected the day after the election, the Democrats would rethink the shutdown. Didn't really gain them much after that. There was some hardcore core that clearly did not agree with that. But I think that was the general expectation going in, and bore itself out.
The question about Chuck Schumer's leadership is, I think, also going to be coming to the fore here in the coming weeks and months. A lot of people calling for his ouster as Senate leader. That's not going to happen during this term, although it could happen after the 2026 election if Democrats don't pick up any seats, particularly if they have a bad year in the Senate and don't take the majority. And then 2028, Kim, would be even more consequential for him because he's facing a reelection fight. And widely believed that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is thinking about whether to challenge Chuck Schumer for his seat in a primary or to run for president. And if she challenges him in the primary, I mean, she's way ahead in the polls among Democratic voters for the moment. And my guess is that what we're seeing here is the twilight of the Chuck Schumer career. And I say that because, and to his credit, he did not endorse Zohran Mamdani for mayor of New York, which of course puts him directly at odds with AOC and the Democratic base.
Yeah, one of the things about that AOC race is, as you just mentioned, I mean, poor Chuck Schumer, he did almost all of this shutdown because he wanted to forestall the possibility of an AOC challenge. So he stuck with the progressives to keep him on side, and he still ended up with them all piling on him. He was very smart. He came out of this shutdown. And in the face of all this criticism, immediately turned around and said, I'm putting my head down and I'm focused on making sure we win a lot of seats next year. And he knows that might be his potential salvation, as it were. And he's not a bad guy for that job, in that Chuck Schumer can be a pragmatist. We saw that back in the spring when he decided to keep the government open. By the way, he did that because he really did think it was the best thing for his party. And he'll be heavily involved in some of the recruitment decisions that are going on around the country, and possibly could get some good candidates in some of these key races. He's got a shot at taking back the Senate. My own view, Paul, is that Chuck Schumer is kind of a scapegoat and excuse for a broader feeling and movement that is rippling through the party, that a lot of this is a generational problem, and they are pushing out senators and older members right and left. Sometimes they're being directly challenged. In the case of Massachusetts, Ed Markey is 79 years old, and Seth Moulton has essentially said, you've been there too long, and it's time for a new generation of leaders to come in. But the pressure has, caused Dick Durbin to get out, Ben Cardin, who's 82, another senator, Debbie Stabenow, a whole bunch of members in the House as well, Anna Eshoo, Danny Davis, Jan Schakowsky. They've all read the leaves here, and they're leaving Congress rather than be beaten in a primary. And you're seeing primaries challenges all over. This is a sort of new wave. It's largely progressives that are doing the challenging, but they're using the age as their argument. And this is part of Chuck Schumer's other problem is he's not old, but he's on the older end. And there's just a mentality on the left right now that you need to be out with the old.
Schumer is mid-70s, I think, is he not? And he's been a senator for 5 terms.
He's been there a long time.
Yeah. He's spent a lifetime in politics. First New York State legislature, and then on up to Congress, the House, and then to the Senate, and of course, ultimately to the leader position in 2017. I think just a final point on this bitterness about Schumer and the Democrats, even though they managed to stick together for 43 days, I think suggests that just how bitter the fight here in the next year is going to be in Congress. The Democrats are, after their victories in the elections in New Jersey and Virginia, are sensing possibilities, and they're seeing that they're likely to, they think, pick up the House, and that they have some shot in the Senate, which I think is actually right. They do have a shot in the Senate, long shot, but they do. And so it's going to be really trench warfare, and not much is going to get done. All right, let's turn to from the ridiculous to the really ridiculous, which is the Jeffrey Epstein files, which returned to the political scene this week with the release by members of Congress, leaks in the case of the emails about Trump, selective leaks, some emails from Jeffrey Epstein regarding Donald Trump. Epstein claims Trump knew more about the young women that Epstein was exploiting than Trump has admitted. Now, again, no evidence of that fact at all. And this is a voice from the grave that you can't talk to corroborate or ask him what he meant. But Democrats, of course, are exploiting it. Meanwhile, the House seems poised to vote on what's called a discharge petition, which you can do if you get a majority of members to sign it over the objections, if need be, of the majority. In this case, that's what it seems likely to happen, a discharge petition to seek the release of all of the Epstein files in the possession of the Justice Department. There's going to be a vote next week. Widely expected Republican defections, but let's listen to Speaker Mike Johnson talk about the Democratic demands for transparency.
If it was about transparency, if it was about full disclosure, there's 2 questions you should ask every Democrat in the House and Senate. Why didn't you bring this up during the 4 years of the Biden administration when the Biden DOJ had all these records the entire time? Nobody ever said a word about it. They didn't care. Now it's the biggest thing in the world. Didn't matter at all when Joe Biden had the files. And secondly, if they're for transparency and they really want all this to be out and there's such this urgency, then why did they vote down the unanimous consent to pass the discharge petition tonight? I can't answer that question, but they should.
Well, they voted it down, I guess, because they wanted to drag this out and make this get their new member sworn in that gives them the 218 votes they wanted, Bill. Let's talk about this. Did we learn anything, do you think, new about Trump's relationship with Epstein from these emails?
I don't think so. I mean, look, some of the most disreputable people in the U.S. are on this story. You know, the reporters covering it, the players. Jeffrey Epstein himself, was not a unbiased guy. Well, I remember, I think it was with you when the news of the Trump P tapes broke. And I didn't know whether they were true or false. I thought they could have been, and much
could have been true, you mean?
Yeah. much hullabaloo, and in the end, there weren't. You would think people would wait and get real facts. Even Jeffrey Epstein, though he intimates that there's something really nefarious going on, he doesn't really spell it out. That's probably better for the people who want to suggest really dark things. They have kind of blank slate to draw. But I don't think we know anything. I do think whatever the arguments for not disclosing, I think that Republicans are going to be forced to sometime make public this stuff. It's a bad argument, that this has to remain secret and so forth. I don't think that's a winning argument.
Well, I'm going to make it in this sense, or at least raise a caveat or two here. It seems to me that Mike Johnson makes a very good point. If these documents were in the hands of the Justice Department under Joe Biden, why didn't they release them? And in particular, that Justice Department wasn't known for its favoritism to Donald Trump. If there were things that implicated Trump made him look bad, why didn't they release or leak them? I doubt it was from an excess of probity. Now, maybe they didn't because we don't know who else is mentioned on all of these documents. And we know that Bill Clinton did hang a little bit with Epstein. We know that Democrats and Republicans and big business people cavorted with Epstein. And maybe there's a sense that, some people are unfairly smeared. And that would be my argument. It's guilt by association. If you happen to go with Epstein, take a plane ride somewhere, or if you were at his townhouse for some party before you knew about what he was doing with Ghislaine Maxwell and these young women, or if you communicated with Epstein in any way, is that fair to them? Is it fair to the victims whose names have not become public to somehow be mentioned here if they don't want to be? There's a reason maybe for caution here, but I guess the political imperative or fear, as Bill suggests, is probably going to overwhelm my prudential arguments, as often happens when I'm making prudential arguments. But still, what do you think is going to happen, Kim?
Paul, one thing to add to your point. Virginia Giuffre, the woman that was abused and no longer with us, she herself said Donald Trump never did anything to her. And there's no evidence that it did. Yet the leak of some of the stuff was phrased in a way they didn't name her, because if they named her, then people would know, well, she's on record as saying he never touched her, never made a pass at her. So there's a lot of sleazy behavior, even apart from what's being alleged.
Well, and the victims of Epstein certainly deserve their day in court if you can bring a case against people. I'm obviously a firm believer in that.
Yes.
But again, the Justice Department under different administrations has had these documents and has only brought certain cases. It hasn't brought any other cases. And, there's much political hay to be made if you could bring those cases and you thought you could get a conviction, because it's a very popular thing to do, which is to bring a case against an alleged pedophile or sexual trafficker, Kim. I guess the one thing you can say about this, about the Republicans for sure, is that they really mishandled all this, including Kash Patel, the FBI, Pam Bondi at Justice, intimating early on in this administration that they would release all the documents, and no. And then Donald Trump really twisting arms on the House Republican side to try to make sure that they don't vote for the discharge petition, which looks like it will fail.
Well, here's why I agree with you and with Mike Johnson with this point about the Biden Justice Department. If you look at what's happened this week, so Democrats on the House Oversight Committee get their hands on 3 emails that, when you put them out there and you redact names and you don't provide any context, they think make it sound like Donald Trump has done something bad. They don't in the end. What Donald Trump has said about this all along, he's denied any wrongdoing in relationship to these Epstein allegations. He maintained that they had a falling out years ago. Even if you look at those 3 emails, that just generally checks out. There remains no evidence that Trump ever took part in any of Epstein's actual trafficking operations. And if you look at those 2 emails, 2 of the emails that the Democrats released in which the victim's name was redacted, Republicans provided that name, and it was Giuffre, who Bill just mentioned, who actually has come out and said that she never had any sight or knowledge of Donald Trump partaking in anything illegal or problematic. So what he has said has generally been true. But here's the thing. In response to Democrats putting out those 3 emails, Republicans released thousands upon thousands of pages of documents. And when you look through them, everyone who was everyone in the who's who had some association with Jeffrey Epstein, including people on the left. There's some pretty cringeworthy email exchanges in there with between Epstein and Larry Summers, the economist. There's communication with Catherine Rumler, who was the former Obama White House counsel. She was texting or emailing with Epstein, saying some fairly unpleasant things about overweight people on the New Jersey Turnpike. I mean, there's just a lot of really.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Hey.
I know. And the reality is, if you step back and you look at this case, I mean, this was a guy who courted celebrity individuals. And a lot of people liked the idea of getting on that plane and going to this private island. There are artists and PR executives and bankers and royalty. I mean, it's a who's who. And yeah, Trump's name is in there. But if you're going to put it out and put it out equally, there's a lot of stuff in there that can smear a lot of different people. And probably people at the Biden administration understood that that's where you were headed. And that is where we are headed now, by the way, because this stuff is all going to get released. It's going to be thousands upon thousands of pages more. We're going to see endless pages of Epstein material. I am so tired of this already. We've done it how many times? But here we go. And I also agree with you, Paul. The Republicans have handled this atrociously. The way you should have handled this was to come out, make the very persuasive argument for the problem of reputational harm and of releasing information about victims if these files came out, make the prosecutorial case for why you do not release things like this in the absence of an actual live case in which someone is going to be brought under a prosecution. And then also, get ahead of this in terms of the Republican thing and talk honestly and openly about what is actually known about Donald Trump's names in here, to try to contain this damage. Instead, we've had people saying, well, we'll put it all out there, and then they've stepped back from that. And the president, now bullying people, saying, don't sign this discharge petition, and sending out threats on Truth Social. And it makes it look as though they have something to hide when arguably, if they're being truthful, there isn't.
So the House is likely to vote next week to release the files. Then it goes to the Senate. You need 60 votes to do that. This won't be the easiest vote for Republicans, Kim. How are you handicapping that vote?
Well, right now, there are only 4 Republicans who have voted on this, have put their names on this discharge petition. And many of them are the usual suspects that really like their names in headlines. It's Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert. But I think that once that 218 number is reached, it could be an open vote. There's a subsection of the Republican base that really thinks there's some there. They want all this, and you're going to see Republicans respond to that, and they'll feel compelled to actually have to stand on the side of transparency, and go ahead with this vote. Then
what happens in the Senate?
This to actually happen, it's not going to go through the Senate. And moreover, the president would have to sign it, and that's not going to happen either. And there certainly aren't votes for override for this. So, I mean, the House Republican Oversight Committee has been doing its own investigation. Some of this stuff is going to come out regardless of that. And I think maybe in the end, most of what anybody wanted may come out purely through that oversight investigation. But we'll continue to have this legislative fight.
Final note, Bill, in many ways, this whole Epstein saga was is a creation of the MAGA movement and fanned by the president when he was campaigning. He and J.D. Vance and others Kash Patel played into the mega base, saying, the deep state is covering up that Epstein killed himself. He was really murdered. No evidence of that. I've talked to Bill Barr, the attorney general at the time. He says absolutely no evidence that Epstein was murdered. Was murdered. But they fanned it during the campaign. So then you win and you get into office and people say, okay, all right, what are you going to do now? And that's one of the reasons that the Republicans find themselves in this predicament.
Yeah, wasn't it the same as Pam Bondi saying she had a list?
Yes.
Of the donors.
They're going to be coming out. You're going to see more.
It was on her desk. I think she said a list on her desk. And then, quietly a couple of weeks later, there was no list. And just feeds mistrust and conspiracy. That's the problem with this whole thing from the beginning. But as you sort of suggest, it's kind of interesting how there are flip sides now. Who's conspiring and who wants it out, who doesn't want it out. A lot of people switch sides. Now they want it out because they think that might hurt Trump. I agree with Kim. I don't think there's anything. There might be embarrassing things. Like she mentioned, I think Larry Summers. That was embarrassing, but I don't think there's going to be any the kind of smoking gun that they thought that having Donald Trump or any of his associates.
All right. We will leave it at that today. Thank you to Kim and Bill, and thank you all for listening to our podcast today on Potomac Watch. We are here every day. Hope to have you with us tomorrow.